I leaned back in the leather chair by my office window, watching the Manhattan skyline glow under the late afternoon sun. My heels dangled from my toes, a quiet rebellion against the power suit I wore. The scent of my vanilla latte still lingered on my desk, curling into the air like a secret. The phone on my desk buzzed. I glanced at the screen, an email from my property management team. The subject line made me pause. New lease inquiry, Marshall and Company. Marshall. Even after all these years, his name still hit like the faint echo of a bruise. I clicked it open. My old boss, the man who once told me I was replaceable, was looking for new office space. And as fate would have it, one of the prime listings he was interested in belonged to me. I almost laughed. Life has a way of circling back, doesn't it? A knock on my door pulled me out of my thoughts. Miss Carter, my assistant Lily, peeked in. They're hoping to view the property tomorrow. Should I set it up? I smoothed my silk blouse, hiding the small smile tugging at my lips. Yes, I said, my voice calm but tinged with something sharper. Let's make sure they feel welcome. This was going to be interesting. 5 years ago, I wasn't sitting in a high-rise office. I was in a cramped cubicle at Marshall and Company, running on lukewarm coffee and the desperate hope that hard work really did pay off. I was 27, hungry, and maybe a little naive. I believed in loyalty, believed that if you stayed late, took on extra projects, and smiled through every ridiculous demand, someone would notice. Marshall noticed, all right, but not in the way I'd hoped. It was a Tuesday morning when he called me into his office. I remember the heavy oak desk, the faint smell of his aftershave, the city skyline mocking me from behind him. He didn't even look me in the eyes at first, just shuffled papers, cleared his throat, and told me, in that polished tone of his, Rachel, the company's moving in a new direction. We've decided to bring in someone with a fresher perspective. A fresher perspective. Translation: someone younger. Cheaper. Easier to mold. My stomach dropped. I clutched the folder in my hands so tightly my knuckles turned white. So, I'm being replaced? He gave a thin smile, the kind that pretends to be sympathetic. It's just business. I held it together until I reached my desk. My hands shook as I packed my things, the framed photo of my grandmother, the coffee mug that read Boss Lady, the small cactus I'd somehow kept alive. My coworkers avoided eye contact. The humiliation burned hotter than the anger. That night, I sat on my tiny apartment floor with takeout cartons and tears, replaying every moment. That's when I noticed the card tucked inside the photo frame of my grandmother. I'd read her handwriting 100 times before, but that night it felt like a dare. If you're going to work this hard, darling, make sure it's for yourself. The next morning, I walked past Marshall and Company without looking up, a cardboard box in my arms and a silent vow in my heart. I would never be replaceable again. The first few months after Marshall and Company were brutal. I took whatever work I could get, answering phones at a dentist's office in the mornings, bartending at night. It wasn't glamorous, but it kept the rent paid and my pride intact. One slow Tuesday at the bar, a regular named Evelyn Brooks sat in her usual corner, swirling a glass of red wine. Evelyn was in her 60s, sharp as a diamond, with the kind of poise that made you stand up straighter just by being near her. "You're wasted here," she told me one night after I'd helped her navigate a messy real estate contract she'd been reading. I laughed it off, but Evelyn didn't. A week later, she showed up with a stack of real estate textbooks and an open offer. "If you're going to hustle this hard, Rachel, you might as well make it pay." I studied in between shifts, memorizing market trends and zoning laws. Evelyn taught me how to spot undervalued properties, negotiate without flinching, and most importantly, play the long game. My first investment was a tiny one-bedroom condo in Queens. The bathroom tiles were cracked, the kitchen outdated, but I saw potential. I spent weekends painting walls and scrubbing grout until my hands ached. When I rented it out, the profit was small, but it was mine. One condo turned into two into a duplex. Every cent I made, I reinvested. I didn't post about it, didn't brag. While my old colleagues were sharing pictures of rooftop parties, I was signing loan papers and attending city planning meetings. Some nights I lay in bed wondering if I'd made a mistake, if this quiet grind would ever lead anywhere. But then I'd remember the way Marshall had looked at me that day, like I was nothing more than a replaceable part. That memory kept me moving. By my third year, I owned a small portfolio for residential properties and a modest commercial building. Evelyn would call me her silent shark, and I wore the nickname with pride. When she passed, she left me her biggest property, a sleek, glass-walled office building downtown. It was the kind of place executives fought to rent space and the kind of address that meant you'd made it. I poured everything into keeping it pristine. Marble floors polished to a mirror shine, an atrium filled with live greenery, security so tight you could smell the professionalism in the air. I never imagined the day would come when Marshall himself would walk through those glass doors looking for a lease. The next afternoon, I arrived at the building early. I wanted everything perfect, not for him, but for me. The marble floors gleamed under the sunlight pouring through the floor-to-ceiling windows. The atrium's green walls looked lush and alive, the faint scent of fresh coffee drifting from the cafe downstairs. I was in my office on the top floor when my assistant buzzed in. "Miss Carter, your 2 o'clock is here. Marshall and Company." For a moment, I just sat there, my hand resting on the cool edge of my desk. Then I smoothed my blazer, checked the faint shine on my lipstick in the reflection of the window, and told her to send them in. Marshall walked in first. Time had put a few lines around his eyes, but the same polished arrogance lingered in his stride. He was flanked by a younger associate, early 30s, all nerves and clipboard, who glanced at me like I was just another leasing agent. "Rachel," Marshall said, with the kind of surprised smile that's more reflex than warmth. "Well, this is unexpected." "Is it?" I tilted my head. Manhattan's a small world. We walked the building together. I let him do most of the talking, explaining what kind of space he needed, how quickly they wanted to move in. He spoke about expansion, growth, all the buzzwords he'd once used to justify pushing me out. The tour ended back in the conference room. I had the lease documents waiting in a neat stack on the polished table. Marshall slid into a chair, flipping through the pages without really looking. "Everything seems in order," he said, reaching for the pen. "So, who's the owner? I should probably know whose hand I'm shaking before I sign." I slid the pen toward him, my gaze steady. "You already do." He looked up. "Excuse me?" I turned the top page around, tapping the signature line. "Owner, Rachel Carter." His hand froze over the paper. "You own this building?" "Yes," I said simply. "And the one across the street? And the duplex on West 74th you used to walk past on your way to the subway?" The associate's eyes darted between us, clearly sensing something personal brewing under the professional surface. Marshall leaned back, his jaw tight. "Well, congratulations. You've certainly done well for yourself." I gave a polite smile, but my voice stayed firm. "I have. And now, if you want this lease, we'll need to discuss the terms, my terms." For the first time since I'd met him, I saw him hesitate. I slid the revised lease across the table. The number in the rent column was higher than what most tenants would expect, but for this location and this building it was still fair. Very fair. Marshall scanned it, his brow furrowing. "This is above market." I folded my hands on the table. "It's market for my properties. And it comes with premium maintenance, top-tier security, and access to amenities your clients will appreciate. If you'd like, I can recommend other spaces in the city, though none will match this." His associate shifted uncomfortably, whispering something in his ear. Marshall cleared his throat. "These clauses, quarterly inspections? Early termination penalties? You're being very thorough." I smiled, calm, deliberate. I learned from the best. That landed. I could see it in the flicker of his eyes. "This isn't personal, Marshall," I continued, my voice smooth but unyielding. "It's business. The same way it was business when you replaced me. The difference is I value what I build. I protect it, and I expect my tenants to do the same." He leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. "So, no room for negotiation?" "Oh, there's room," I said, leaning forward. "If you can commit to paying on time, maintaining the space, and honoring the agreement without excuses, then we have a deal. But if you're looking for shortcuts or special treatment, you won't find it here. Silence stretched between us, heavy but not hostile. He knew I had the upper hand. I wasn't the desperate employee at his mercy anymore. I was the gatekeeper to something he wanted. Finally, he sighed, signing his name on the dotted line. Guess I'll be seeing you around, landlord. I took the papers, tucking them into a leather folder.
Yes.
You will. I stood, offering my hand, firm, professional. His grip was still strong, but there was something else there now. A flicker of respect. Or maybe just the realization that the balance had shifted for good. As he walked out, I noticed he glanced around the lobby one more time, at the marble, the greenery, the space that was mine. This time, I didn't feel the sting of the past. I felt something far better. Control. The day after Marshall signed the lease, I walked through the building early in the morning, before the tenants arrived and the city's noise seeped in. The sun spilled through the glass walls, casting gold over the marble floors. I paused by the reception desk, where a single framed photo sat, the one of my grandmother I always kept close. The same photo I'd taken from my desk at Marshall and Company on my last day there. Her smile still held that quiet mischief, the kind that dared me to dream bigger. I pulled a card from the back of the frame, the one I'd read 100 times. If you're going to work this hard, darling, make sure it's for yourself. I thought about the nights I'd worked double shifts, the weekends I'd spent scrubbing floors and properties I could barely afford, the moments I'd fought off doubt because quitting wasn't an option. Now, my name was on deeds, not resumes. My worth was measured in assets, not approval. And most importantly, I'd built it all without becoming bitter. I didn't need revenge. I had something better, ownership. When Marshall's company moved in, I kept things strictly professional. No pointed comments, no smug glances. Just a warm welcome and prompt service. But every time I walked past his office, I couldn't help but notice the view from his window, the same skyline I had watched the day I got the email about his lease request. It wasn't just a view anymore. It was a reminder that life had come full circle. As I locked my office one evening, the city lights twinkling like they were in on the joke, I whispered the words I'd been saving. Not for him, but for me. You can replace an employee, but you can't replace the landlord.